Hey crafters, we're back with part 2 of this tutorial series on prop finishing. Today we're going to be taking a look at leak seal and how to use it for finishing your props. If you haven't already seen my video on quick sealing and how to prepare for this sealing step, go ahead and watch that now. But if you've already done that, let's jump in. I wanted to talk about some of the safety before you start leak sealing. And you're going to want to use an organic vapor respirator to protect yourself. This leak seal is very not healthy. It's very bad for you. It's got a very strong chemical and smell presence, and you're going to want to use a respirator to protect yourself from that, and a highly ventilated environment. Even while you're not spraying and this thing is just curing and drying, it still retains a lot of that smell for about a week or two. And so you're going to, even while it's curing, you want to try to maintain well ventilation or good ventilation. I also recommend using a lab coat just to protect your clothes. So I was wearing a lab coat while leak sealing this DMR, and I actually still ended up getting some on my jeans, but wow, what are you going to do at that point? But I also like to use goggles. I wear those on my face and just to protect my glasses from getting leak seal on them. I don't necessarily need them. I could also just take the glasses off, but that's just me. But yeah, before you start using the leak seal, I recommend preheating the can. That's to help get the leak seal to flow better out of the nozzle. I just do this by boiling some water in an electric kettle, putting it in like a movie theater cup or something, letting it cool down a little bit because I don't want to use fresh boiling water, and then I'll just put the can in there and let that sit for about 2 to 3 minutes. I don't want to go too long. Anything around 5 minutes runs the risk of over pressurizing the can, and then when you go to shake it, it could potentially explode. I had one of my cans pop the safety pressure bubble on me, so that was scary. It's also worth saying that some cans are just naturally bad. I've had, out of my about 30 cans, I had one can that just simply wouldn't spray at all. It would just kind of give this white foam thing out of the nozzle. And so I just threw that one out. Thankfully I had a bunch of other cans. Some tips on applying the leak seal. You're going to want to maintain short controlled bursts of the leak seal, in about what you want to spray it in about 1 second increments. So like psst, 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 just like that. And you're going to want to maintain the proper distance, which is around 14 inches. So you're going to want to, keep it like about that far from the prop. Spray that on, and while you're spraying it, you want to do one light coat followed by one heavy coat. It's something you just kind of have to get a feel for. It's actually really tricky to get a proper heavy coat because you want to avoid letting the leak seal pool. If the leak seal pools, then it's going to have a hard time curing properly in those areas. It may add too much material and just round out the details you worked so hard to add, or it may not cure at all. If you do find leak seal pooling, you can just wipe it off and then sand that area down and reapply leak seal after that cures, which would set you back a couple weeks on having that prop ready. And if that's an issue, you could also just leave it on there and hope that you can sand it down later, or just ignore the defect. Thankfully, I didn't run into any of that on this prop, but that also means I don't have any footage of resolving that to show you guys. You also want to look out for bad texturing. So one of the things I've noticed is that leak seal can be really easy to get a really rough, like texturized rubber look, and you want to avoid that unless you're specifically going for it. Like on my Halo Reach boots, the boots have a textured rubber look to them, and so I was actually going out of my way to apply a heavy textured look. But most of the time, the surfaces I work with are supposed to be smooth, real flat, and so it's something I'm it's the issue I struggle with the most while applying leak seal. I found that some cans just simply are dedicated to applying a rough texture, and unfortunately, on this prop, my known good cans ran out, and at the end, I had to use my last can of leak seal, which was known to give off this rough texture. So that's going to mean I'm going to have to do a lot more sanding work to get the prop looking good, which I'll be sanding that soon, assuming all that goes well. It's worth I also want to note that over time, while the leak seal is curing, it will tighten and so like shrink down, and it'll just like tighten in closer to the prop, giving a nice crisp appearance, assuming you didn't put on too much. If you put on too much and everything looks rounded out and blurry, then that's going to stay. It's just simply too much material, and it's really hard. And I had that issue on one of my parts for my reach build, and it's really hard to get rid of. You can try sanding it down to get those, just like sanding to get the edge back, but it's going to be mixed results.
Okay, so here I'm just showing some of the leak seal application. There's not too much going on here. I'm really just spraying it in 1 second bursts around 14 inches away. But I don't want to waste too much of your time with boring spray-on footage, so I'm just going to fast forward through this. One of the issues I had while I was doing this, though, was my prop kept falling, so you're going to want to be careful in how you set that up. I'm still trying to find a good setup solution for painting at my new location.
Okay, so this is what I'm talking about right here. See, look, oh, let me get this camera in focus here. See that, all that rough looking texture on there? That is no good. That is what you want to try to avoid. All of that is going to create a lot of extra work on the sanding. I have to spend forever sanding that down to get it smooth. And even then, I'm not sure how smooth I'll be able to get it. What you want to see is something more like, kind of more like the inside of here. That's a lot smoother. Still going to need some sanding, but that turned out a lot better. Let's see if there's something on the other side over here as well. Yeah, see right there. That's all a lot smoother. That's going to turn out better. Not going to need as much sanding, but it's still going to need some sanding for sure.
Okay, so some of you may be asking, why am I not using Plastidip, Mod Podge, or something like that? Well, I can't say I'm actually too familiar with Mod Podge or its similar products, so I can't answer that question, unfortunately. But I can tell you why I'm not using Plastidip. Plastidip has a tendency to peel off of the foam, taking the paint and everything with it, and that's clearly not good. I used Plastidip on my first costume. I didn't have the peeling issue myself, but I've heard from a lot of other cosplayers that the Plastidip can and perhaps will peel over time. It's also very susceptible to wrinkling. So, you know, as the prop flexes and such, it'll put like wrinkles in the paint line, and that's non-desirable. But on the other hand, Plastidip is significantly cheaper and easier to use. So Plastidip, I believe, is around $5 per can, and I think Leak Seal is somewhere between $8 and $10 per can. I don't buy by the can. I usually buy like a big box of it all at once. So I'm not sure what the specific price is per can of Leak Seal, but it's definitely more expensive. Leak Seal is also a lot trickier to get used to. Like I mentioned, there's a lot of texturing issues, there's pooling issues, it takes a long time to cure, whereas Plastidip, it's real easy to use. You just take the can, shake it, you spray it on, give it a nice strong coat, and it should be good to go. Now, I'm not sure if that's the proper way to use it. I'm not sure if there's a better way to use it, but that's how I used it when I made my first costume, and I didn't notice any issues with that. It It was real easy to see what was where the Plasti Dip was applied and where I had missed a spot. So yeah, it's if you're really low on budget and you just want to do something quick and easy, and you don't really care how long the prop or costume will last over time, you know, with the whole wrinkling or peeling issue, then go ahead, Plasti Dip away. But if you want to make something that's going to be just a little higher quality, more expensive, last a little longer, then you should definitely be going with Leak Seal, in my opinion, because Leak Seal also has this nice property where, because it's a thicker, heavier rubber, it can make the outside of your prop a lot firmer. So like when you press your thumb into it, it's going to feel closer to a printed prop, but it's not quite going to bring it there, but it'll feel stronger than Plasti Dip, whereas it's still definitely just foam under that. So yeah, there's some strengthening and just finish benefits there. Leak Seal is sandable. However, Plasti Dip doesn't need sanding, so there's a balance to be struck there. I don't think you can get the textured rubber look if you want that with Plasti Dip, because in my experience it always applied smooth. Maybe you can, but I don't know. Without further ado, let's jump into sanding. Okay guys, so I'm just going to show you some sanding. So here I've just got 3 blocks of different levels of sandpaper. It's just a piece of EVA foam I barged some sandpaper onto. So we've got 80 grit, 150 grit, and 320 grit. As you can see in this texture right here is super, well, this actually feels pretty smooth, but it's not even. And the rest of this is super rough. And that is far from what we want. Now, it's possible I could leave this alone and just kind of give it like a rubbered texture look, make it kind of look like it's supposed to be textured like that. But I wanted to show you guys how, just some basic sanding. So I'm just going to take some, I don't know, this feels like probably 150 grit will do some work. So I'm just going to take my 150, I'm just going to rub it down and see how this goes. Oh, it's so much smoother. There we go. And let's take some 320 grit. That is so much better. That texture is, I can't feel it with my finger at all. That's basically gone. Now, one of the mistakes I made when I did my reach build was I sanded everything using just 320 grit, which made it take a long time. So I've learned since then, definitely recommend starting with a lower grit and going up to a higher grit. But let's see if we can get some of this texture out here. Now, this bit right here is wearing down faster than this bit, so I'm going to try to avoid sanding this all the way down to foam and just focus on sanding this end. And I'm watching this white wear color that it changes to see what's being sanded and what's not. And I'm trying to keep it as even as possible. Okay, now I'm going to switch to this higher grit, see how this turns out.
There we go. That is so much better. So much better. Now you don't have to use these blocks depending on what I'm sanding. I'll also just use a regular strip of sandpaper. Like this will make, I like to fold this up, and this will help me get into corners and such. So you don't have to use blocks, you can just use sandpaper. That's how I did my whole reach build. I didn't use these blocks much. I really just used strips of this. But yeah, you know, you just go ahead and do that across the whole prop. Now while you're sanding, you're going to want to watch for all these spots right here. These black bits mean that it's not perfectly smooth in that spot. Those are little divots. So if I would recommend focusing down on those and trying to sand that down so that it's all this nice grayish texture. That's how you get a perfect finish. But you know, if each of those little divots, it'll change the way hear that clack? That's the leak seal benefit over Plasti-Dip. Gives it that firmer finish. But yeah, what was I saying? There's really not too many tricks specific to sanding leak seal here. If you know how to sand, then you know you're just sanding the leak seal. So there's nothing new here. Okay guys, that's all I've got for you today. Thank you for watching. I hope you found that this was useful in learning how to use leak seal to prepare your props for painting, give it a nice smooth finish that has a stronger feel to it. If you have any questions about this process, or if there's something else that you'd like to see me do in the future, go ahead and leave a comment down below. I'd love to see what you guys are wondering, asking, or what you're interested in. Next up in this series, I will be talking about how I paint my props to give that base color, or base level of paint. And then after that, we'll be talking about weathering. And without further ado, I'll see you guys in the next one.